So I promised you today that I would start showing you some ideas of risk coming in without having formulas, without having you to worry about it explicitly. But I think it's a good idea when you start talking about investments, like you could buy a government bond and you think there's no risk, but actually there is. So things like that I have to deal with. And then I'll talk a little bit about corporate bonds, which have, the only reason I'm talking about them today is not because corporate bonds are popular all over the world, but to show you that it's not very different from government bonds, except for additional sources of risk. Okay? So we'll talk about risk and return later explicitly, but for now, in the context of loans and bonds, let's talk about interest rate risk. So think about this. Right now we are government bond, and what are we expecting? That if the government bond says coupon 30, 30, 30 and 1,000, we are expecting it to pay, right? So we are expecting what is called no default. So let's keep that risk out of the picture. But the fact of the matter is that just because I buy a government bond and because I believe it will pay for sure does not mean there is no risk. Okay, so let me just briefly cover the concept of risk. The uncertainty concerning bond values prices due to interest rate fluctuations is known as the interest rate risk of bonds. In other words, given that I have the payments fixed and the government is expected to pay for sure, the only source of risk is prices changing because the discount rate or the interest rate or the comparative cost of capital is changing. There are two types of this risk. One is called price risk and the other is called coupon reinvestment risk. I want to talk about both, and I want to give you an intuition for both. I don't want you to be too worried about trying to do the math right now, because as I said, the main focus of this class is to do value creation, and this is something I believe you need to know at a gut level. You may not need to deal with, but if you have the patience for it, it'll also give you a sense of how risk works, and I really like this stuff. So bear with me. It's cool stuff. So timeline once more, and I'm going to be a little slow on this to give you a sense of what's going on. So suppose we start with zero coupon. And here's the bond, here's the 1,000. And for simplicity, let's assume it's 10 years, which actually I'll change to 20 periods. Why? Because 6 monthly compounding is built into the pricing of all bonds. Everybody got it? Okay, let's start. You buy this bond here, and let's assume its return, built-in yield to maturity, is about 1.489%. Why am I choosing this number? We just did this example, right, a while ago. So this price today was about 74.09, if I remember right. Just confirm all of this, please. We have done it earlier. When will I surely get 1.489% per how much? 6 months. When? If I hold this bond till maturity. This is called yield to maturity. I still have some risk. Even though I get $1,000, I want to emphasize one thing. You still have some risk built in. And the reason is the inflation built into the pricing of this bond, reflected in this, is at time zero. And the actual inflation is going to be a little bit different, right, over time. That's the first point. But we are going to ignore inflation risk. We are talking about real stuff. We just talk about the $1,000 we'll get for sure. So 1.489 is the built-in return that I'll get per 6 months. First point, do I have to get exactly 1.489 every 6 months? Answer is no. And that's one of the things about yield to maturity. It is an average I'll get over 20 periods. But it could go like this, whichever way in the middle. And that's the key here, is that while time is passing, interest rates are changing. The reason I can immunize myself, and that's actually a word we use, immunize, like get a shot against changes, is by holding it till maturity, right? But meanwhile, things are bouncing around, and that's the point. Suppose after 5 years, which is about 10 periods from now, because of some financial need, I'm forced to sell this bond. Because of some financial need, I'm forced to sell this bond. You have become awesome at time traveling. Tell me, what will the bond's price be 10 years from now? Think again, pure finance. The awesomeness of finance is you time travel. Quick question, will it be something that you know for sure? No, but that has never stopped us from valuing things, right? So imagine yourself first thing at this point, and then where should you look? Past or forward? Forward. So you know that the price at time 10 periods from now, which is 5 years from now, has to be what? $1,000 divided by what? 1 plus yield to maturity raised to power what? How many periods left? 10. Question is, this number you don't know today, right? Which is this yield to maturity? At which point? At point 10. You know your yield to maturity today. It's the interest rate today you know. 10 years from now you don't. So what is this going to do? Suppose yield to maturity fluctuates and becomes greater than 1.489 per period. What will happen to the price of the bond? It'll be lower than you expect. On the other hand, interest rates are bouncing around and it's gone above or below 1.489 because inflation has dropped or whatever in expectation. What will happen to the price of the bond? It'll go up. The point is not whether it'll go up or down. The point is you do not know this standing today. You know P20. Why? Because it's 1,000. And you expect the government to pay up. But you do not know P10. That's called price risk. Okay, so just think about it. And I'm going to come back to the other risk in a second. Think about it. What is price risk? Price risk, we defined today, was, I'm going to go back to the timeline in a second. Price risk we defined today as not knowing the price. So even if I have a zero coupon bond, it has price risk at all points before 20 or all points before maturity, right? Because if I have forced to sell it in the future, I don't know what the price is. So this is what happens. Price goes up if yield to maturity goes down. And the opposite is true, right? So this is called price risk. It's in every bond. It doesn't matter what bond you have. Coupon paying bond, not coupon paying bond. But suppose you now have coupon bonds, right? And just give you some flavor of risk. Remember, it is so logical. I want you to follow the logic. Don't worry about the details here. Risk is very intuitive, okay? So let me draw out the same, 20,000. And now what's happening? Every period you're getting $30. Sorry, 230. Quick first question, and think very carefully before you answer. Suppose I hold this bond till maturity. Suppose I hold this bond till maturity. And suppose the yield to maturity in this bond is 2%. Its pricing is such that the yield to maturity is 2%, right? If I hold this bond till maturity, will I get the 2% per year or per 6 months actually? It doesn't matter whether it's 2 or 5. The question is very simple. Can you calculate the yield to maturity of this bond? What do I need to tell you? The price. So suppose price today is 1,000. What is the yield to maturity? 3%. So the price today is lower, it's higher, and higher, it's lower, right? So just for simplicity, if you understand this problem better, let's make it 3%. We know that if the yield to maturity is 3%, which is exactly the coupon rate of 3%, we'll get exact face value. So let's make it very simple. You buy it for 1,000 and face value is 1,000. That's simply an artifact that the two things, coupon rate and yield to maturity, are the same. Okay? Which one of these are fixed? The $30 is fixed. Yield to maturity changes. Okay? Quick question for you. What if I hold this bond till maturity and get the 1,000? Will I have a 3% yield to maturity? And if you think about it, you want to say yes, but the answer is no. And the reason is this number will change in the future. It's bound to. Markets change, inflation changes. The only thing fixed is the $30, right? So it's changing. The 3% is changing over time. So why is that risky? Because imagine at 3%, what are you going to do with this $30 when you get the first 30? What are you going to do? You're going to put it under your mattress. What will you do? You'll put it in the marketplace and you think how much will it earn per period? 3%. It's called coupon reinvestment risk. Why? Because built into your thinking is when you get money and you keep it under the mattress, it's losing interest. So what are you going to invest every $30 at? 3%. But that 3% is likely to change. So what's going to happen? Even if I hold bond till maturity, which pays coupon, it has coupon reinvestment risk. Why is that? Because I do not know the future yields to maturity, and therefore I do not know how much the $30 every time I get it'll earn for me. Why is coupon reinvestment risk not in a zero coupon bond? Sounds like a silly question, right? Why is coupon reinvestment risk not in a zero coupon bond? The answer is very straightforward. If it doesn't pay a coupon, you don't have to worry about what reinvestment you're going to do. Okay? So there are two risks, and let me just finalize everything one more time, and it'll give you a sense. And remember again, be cool about this. Don't worry about getting it perfectly right. So here's the thing. You're getting $30, $1,000. Suppose I sell now at year 10. Suppose for some reason I have to sell this bond after year 10. I'll get two things. I have to worry about two things. What is the price 10? It'll be the PV of how many payments? 30. Payment 10. How many of them? 10 left. And face value of 1,000. And you know this price will change depending on interest rates. And if interest rates go up, if R goes up, price goes down. That's one simple rule. There are few things in life that are really work all the time. This is one of them. However, that was the only thing you would have to worry about if there was no payment, right? What you do have to worry about is though, what is the value of these at this point? Remember, you've been getting 30, 30, 30. So now you have to look at the value of these when you're selling them. And these have risk too. coupon reinvestment risk is the future value at time 10 of coupon of 30, n is equal to 10 times. And this is also not known. So you have both risks. The good news is what? If R goes up, you benefit. If R goes up, you lose. And the awesome thing about this is a coupon paying bond, if interest rates go up in the future, that helps you. For what? The part that you are reinvesting the coupons. But when you sell it, you know it's going to hurt you for the remaining value of the bond. So they kind of move in opposite directions, and there is this notion of immunization which says you can manage your portfolio that you perfectly balance the two risks. That's called being immunized. Now I'm going beyond the scope of the class, but I wanted to just give you a flavor that even simple government bonds have risk built into them. One last time, what is the only strategy that is without risk? One where you buy a zero coupon bond and hold it till maturity, right? What I want to do now is spend about 5 minutes on corporate bonds, and then we'll take a break and I'll come back and do some cool stuff, show you some data. And one of the values of doing bonds and stocks, as I said, is that you probably at a personal level will start connecting with things. And it doesn't have to be that you're working in a company and so on, right? Corporate bonds almost always pay coupons. Corporate bonds are largely US phenomena. And as I said, there's no reason why we shouldn't have all kinds of opportunities to borrow and lend, but they are largely a US phenomena. In most countries, the bond, quote unquote, is between an entity, you, the corporation, and a bank, just like individuals. Like government bonds, they are subject to interest rate risk. Why? Because they promise a coupon and they promise a face value. And there's risk involved. But they also are subject to something called default risk. And default risk is the risk of not getting paid what you thought you would. And people perceive that government bonds will pay for sure, or at least relative to companies will pay for sure. However, corporate bonds may have problems. And by the way, the financial crisis has shown us tons of this. Turns out there are rating agencies that rate corporate bonds, and they say AAA bond is what? They rate bonds of sovereign countries too. But what they say is AAA is, for example, the best kind of rating you could get, and then AA and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the notion of rating is an outside arm's length party is trying to tell you, the investor, as what exactly is the chances of default for this bond. Very tough to predict. Very tough to predict default risk. And models have been built and a lot of effort goes into it, but it's not an easy thing. One last thing, most bonds are contracts and loans. So corporate bonds are also contracts and loans. I do not want you to think that just because the word bond is used, it has to be coupon, coupon, coupon face value. Bond inherently is any loan, but most traded bonds issued by governments have coupon, coupon, coupon face value. One last question for you. Suppose you have two identical bonds, same maturities, same coupon rates, one government, one corporate. Okay? So sticking with our example, $30 every 6 months issued by a government bond or a corporate bond, and face value 1,000. Identical. Quick question for you. Which will sell for less? So I'm saying, come on guys, Corporation X, 1,000 face value, 30 every 6 months for 20 times. Government of the US doing the same, which will sell for less. If you know the answer, you know risk. The one that will sell for less is one that you perceive will have a chances of default. Why would you pay more for something that's likely to not pay you what it promises? So the thing that will sell for less typically is a corporate bond. Not because it's a corporate bond. The name doesn't mean anything. It's just your perception of actually what is going to happen in the future. Why? Because of exactly what I just said. You perceive that all 30 plus 1,000 the government will pay, but some of the 30 and maybe the 1,000 will not be paid by the corporation. The 1,000 is likely to be more subject to default because it's so much larger. But it also depends on what situation the company is when that payment is due. Okay, so I will take a break. We have done a lot on bonds today, which was our plan, but I do not want to leave this and also next week without introducing you to real world data and how finance is just what we talked about is happening out there. So it's not, I'm not pulling things out of a hat, and that's what I love about it, is that it is everywhere. And it's only in the eye of the beholder that the difference is there. So if you are an investor, you're looking of giving money to a company or to the government, and vice versa, they're just borrowing from you. So see you in a little bit. Take a break and we'll go on the web.